According to the Washington Post debate speaking time calculator, Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke significantly more than any of the other candidates at 23 minutes and 1 second. That is just one example of her being treated as the one to beat last night. Her supporters believe that she broke out from the pack.
Progressive Change Campaign Committee co-founder Adam Green, he wrote about Senator Warren's debate performance that, quote, she proved why millions of Americans see her as the front runner by strongly representing her clear vision of challenging powerful interests on behalf of middle-class families. Here to break down more from Westerville, Ohio, is Adam Green himself. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, good to be here. Greetings from Westerville.
Well, we're glad to have you, Adam.
Beautiful
right.
Westerville, Ohio.
Adam, this morning, one of the biggest things that Senator Warren spent a lot of her time last night was defending her stance on Medicare for all. Now, Pete Buttigieg spent quite a bit of time going after Senator Warren on CNN this morning. He said that she's given more specifics about how many selfies she's taken than about how she's going to pay for the health care plan. What's your response to that?
Yeah, well, first, I think she did less defending her position and more advancing her position on Medicare for all. I mean, if millions of Americans came away thinking, boy, Elizabeth Warren wants to bring down costs for a family like mine, that's her position, that's pretty good for Elizabeth Warren. And, you know, honestly, I think a lot of pundits, and certainly the insurance companies, and unfortunately some Democratic candidates, really are trying to bait Democrats like Elizabeth Warren into saying magic words that will be actively used to deceive voters in the general election. You know, the bottom line is, and Bernie Sanders' own, former economist says this, Medicare for all is like a tax cut for millions of American families. And Elizabeth Warren is basically advancing that argument. Now, yeah. Pete, it seems like he might be throwing, more insults at Elizabeth Warren, a progressive champion, than he is at President Trump. And I'm not sure why he feels the need to do that. I think it's really a disservice to voters to be attacking other Democrats from the right as opposed to just advancing his policy vision.
Well, it's not only, look, these candidates can do whatever they want, but there's just no evidence that it's going to work. We've had these same exact, literally the exact questions asked of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, debate after debate. Amy Klobuchar has been going after, John Delaney's been going after him, Michael Bennett's been going after him, and none of it has landed. Not only was Pete very sharp in the attack last night, but he also has a new ad buy that names Sanders and Warren specifically and attacks them over Medicare for all. So why do they keep going down this path, and what makes them think that this time it's going to work?
Yeah, well, first, I think you're completely right on that first point. Not only is there not evidence that this attack does work, but there is evidence that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders making the core case for Medicare for all does work. In the last couple of polls after the various debates, Elizabeth Warren standing in the polls and the perception of who the winner was benefited her, even after these exact attacks were made. So, why is Pete doing it? Honestly, I think that he's having a fundamental misreading of some of the underlying dynamics here. It's actually not true that all of Joe Biden's supporters are conservatives, and it seems like that's the audience that Pete must be playing for within the primary electorate. We've been polling our own members since November, and there are many scared progressives who are desperate to beat Trump, who are temporarily parked with Joe Biden. They don't want to see progressive ideas attacked. They don't want a mean Democrat attacking other Democrats from the right. They want a progressive who can win in an ideal world. So I think, again, Pete is just misreading the situation, and it's unfortunate that he's continuing that even into his interviews this morning.
Yeah, Sagar, I think he's been spending too much time with donors. Yeah, I think that's what's really going on.
We talked about last night. I do wonder, Adam. I mean, we saw Bernie Sanders. He said quite clearly, yes, middle-class taxes will go up, but ultimately all costs will go down. Senator Warren just seemed so desperate not to give an ad soundbite to a Republican ad, then rather than admit that. Why is that?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't call it desperate. I think Democratic voters want to beat Trump and appreciate Democratic politicians who are savvy. And I just don't see why we would give the insurance companies rope to hang Democrats with a deceptive talking point. The bottom line is that Medicare for all will function like a tax cut for families. I actually think that Bernie Sanders did a fantastic job back in the day in the Fox News town hall. I think he crushed it. The only 2.5 seconds I disagreed with was when he basically said that Republican and insurance industry talking point. So, maybe it's you agree to disagree on that. But I think it's a savvy political move, and I think it's a more accurate description of what will happen. It will be like a tax cut for middle-class families.
And Adam, does Senator Warren plan on paying for Medicare for All with the same payment mechanism that Bernie Sanders plans on using to pay for it? I mean, is the model the same in that way?
Well, as you know, she's an endorser of the Bernie bill. She's with Bernie on this. And I think, honestly, as we've discussed on this show before, there are multiple Medicare for All bills out there, including this year's Bernie bill, last year's Bernie bill, Pramila Jayapal's bill in the House, Keith Ellison's prior bill in the House, all of which have different mechanisms for lots of stuff, but all agree on key points, which are no copays, no deductibles, no out-of-pocket costs like premiums, no out-of-network doctors. Everybody will be covered, and private insurance companies that make profit by denying people care will be gone. Those 6 things are true in every bill, and that's what Elizabeth Warren will stand for. And how you pay for it, there's a million ways of structuring it, and we'll see where it lands.
Well, we also saw there was a pretty big contrast with the former vice president, especially on that issue of the wealth tax. That was something that ignited a bit of a fight that was on the stage there. What did you make of the Beto O'Rourke and other positions that were anti-wealth tax on the stage?
I gotta say, during that moment, I felt a little bit bad for Beto O'Rourke. I think there's a legitimate fight for him to pick with Mayor Pete, who had been attacking Beto from the right on guns. Attacking Elizabeth Warren on wealth inequality and having an economics debate with her, honestly, was just not the best idea. And I think it just, true to form, allowed Elizabeth Warren to do political jujitsu, taking an attack and turning it into a strength, making the case for a wealth tax, making the case that it can pay for universal child care, and raising wages for workers, and so many other things that would benefit everyday middle-class families. So I think it was an opportunity that he handed Elizabeth Warren, similar to Joe Biden deciding to attack Elizabeth Warren for creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, weirdly taking credit for it for a moment, but by the end, exposing millions of new people to the idea that Elizabeth Warren created the consumer watchdog, and according to Joe Biden, did a hell of a job in that position. So again, I think she's very good at political jujitsu and turning attacks into strength.
I frankly, we thought that was both gross and really sort of, condescending and sexist moment from him. Very quickly, Adam, outside of Warren, who's your candidate, who did you think had a good night last night?
I think numerous people had a good night last night. Look, Bernie Sanders, I think, did what he had to do. I think between a very strong debate performance and some forthcoming endorsements from important progressives, he is showing his supporters that his campaign has staying power and that he has strength to keep going, and that's great. I thought he was fantastic last night. Might have been his best debate so far. Amy Klobuchar, I think, really did what she needed to do.
Is that a loss for you all? She was looking at Sanders and Warren. Is that a loss for the Warren campaign that she decided to back Bernie?
Sure, I think anybody would have preferred that endorsement, but I think it's a double-edged sword in a sense. It is good timing for Bernie in the sense that, coupled with a strong debate performance, it shows a sturdiness to his campaign. I'm not sure that this timing is the ideal in the grand scheme of things. If he were surging in the polls a couple weeks before Iowa and something like this broke, it would have felt like a domino falling. So we'll see where that goes. I think if the campaign is smart, which they are, and the members of Congress have time, which I'm not sure they do, they would send them on the road to do lots of rallies. Short of that, I'm not sure that there's a lot of progressive voters who are thinking, is Bernie Sanders progressive enough for me? Oh, AOC's on board. So I do think it really matters what they do with this endorsement more than getting the endorsement. But finally, I do think that if Elizabeth Warren is the nominee, she can help unite Bernie Sanders supporters and Warren supporters behind Warren if she's nominee.
I think that's probably right.
Adam, thank you. Always glad to have your time.
Yep, take care.
Next on Rising, what did the Republicans think of last night's debate?
Mark Lauder, the Director of Strategic Communications for President Trump's re-election campaign, shares which candidates stood out to them when Rising continues.